Welcome to Vermontitude, a collaborative effort between Great Eastern Radio, the Brattleboro Reformer, and BCTV to bring you the stories behind the stories on the topics you want to learn more about. Because there's always more, so there'll always be Vermontitude. Hosted by me, Peter Fish Case. Welcome to Vermontitude. New episodes drop every Tuesday and can be found at vermontitude.com, reformer.com, or on BCTV. They're recorded at the River Garden Marketplace Studio in downtown Brattleboro in collaboration with Great Eastern Radio, the Brattleboro Reformer, and BCTV. I'm Peter Fish Case. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and they cover all of Windham County and the towns that reside within them. Joining the program today, we're going to be talking about a myriad of big, hot topics. Mr. Audette from the Brattleboro Reformer. Let's start. This was an interesting story that I didn't know anything about. The I-91 Bandit. Tell me a little bit about that.
I don't really know if I'd known the guy. He was dubbed Route 91 Bandit, I-91 Bandit. I don't know if I knew. I think the police were kind of keeping a lid on it because they didn't want. I think they've been on his tail for a while. They've known who it was, but they didn't have enough information to actually bring him in. And I hadn't realized this guy had robbed 15 banks or attempted to rob 15 banks in 11 months, had succeeded in at least 13 of the robberies. And in Nashua, he actually, a third of his take, which was $150,000 over 15 robberies, he took a third of his take in Nashua, where he jumped the counter and busted into the vault where people were counting money. And he walked away with $50,000 there.
Wow. So, what's the time span of all these thefts?
So I think it would have started around August or September of last year and stretched through about October of this year. And he'd robbed People's United in Brattleboro. Tried to rob it twice, was only successful once, walked away with $11,000. Also robbed Walpole Savings in Keene of $7,000. Banks in Greenfield, Deerfield, a bunch of banks in Connecticut, which is why it may be filed in federal court in Connecticut because the majority of the banks were down there. Okay. But if you look at, the big one was in New Hampshire, in Nashua.
Yeah, $50,000 is a heck of a payday for one day.
And who knows what he was doing with the money? A lot of times this is drug driven. People on the edge, need money to fulfill a drug addiction, but one of the ways they were able to nab him was they were surveilling him at MGM in Springfield where he was gambling. Oh. And they grabbed, he threw away a Red Bull with a straw in it. And they grabbed that and they did a DNA analysis and matched it against some paper bands, believe it or not, that he had left DNA on at another bank. He had unwrapped some money at another bank and left the paper bands behind. And they had DNA on that and they had DNA on the straw from when he was at the casino.
That's crazy. I don't remember reading that detail in the article.
Yeah, it was in there.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm telling you, the cameras and DNA are everywhere, man.
They are.
You will get caught. Yep. You will get caught. Let's see. So there's been a series of fires, and I know that you hadn't personally covered them. We tried to get the reporter who recovered the recent McNeill's fire, which happened tragically last week, and I guess I should full disclosure. In the middle 80s, my dad and a partner who was Ray McNeill's brother-in-law opened up a restaurant on South Main Street called $3 Dewey's.
Nice.
Ray used to come in, and he was a classical cellist. I don't know if you knew that at all. He was like a Juilliard trained, like legit classical cellist, and the guy was good. And he would come in and he would literally, it was funny, we used to say this is the only classical cellist that will play for beer money, right? And he purchased $3 Dewey's from my dad, and my dad got out of the restaurant business and opened up, I think it was then called Dewey's Ale House, changed the name a little bit. And his whole idea behind the idea of a brewery was he was going to brew his own beer. I said, "You're crazy. That stuff like that's never going to take off. You're competing against all these big people." And what did I know? I also thought the thought of Mocha Joe's opening up and being a successful coffee shop was also going to be a little crazy. But I don't always get it right. He bought that $3 and of course named it McNeill's Brewery, and here we stand. But and now the community is realizing over the course of the past week that we may have lost Ray McNeill. We lost Ray McNeill. That's been confirmed. Right? I don't know if you have any further details on that. I know it wasn't a story that you covered.
I just know pretty much what everybody else knows. I know that the fire originated in the apartment that Ray was living in. I know the building hadn't been used in the last couple of years because he'd shut down pre-COVID. Ray was actually pretty sick before COVID. And I'm sure that closing the pub had a lot to do with his illness. Otherwise, most people have been trying to slug it out through COVID.
Right.
But he had been closed. He had been promising that he was planning to reopen, but then he'd also received the notice from the fire department that the building was structurally unsound and that he couldn't reopen until he addressed some of those issues.
Right. Yeah. So, it's a very sad and tragic end. Ray McNeill was a great guy. He was sort of a nice figure in the town of Brattleboro as this guy. He was, I think, I want to say one of the first microbrews in Brattleboro. I can't think of anybody else who did it. I think he was literally the first.
Yeah. I could rack my brain too, but I think he was on that leading edge of microbreweries. He was one of the first actually in the whole region.
Yep. Yeah, no, he was good. But so we lost him tragically in the fire, and the whole building has since been
it's tore down. They were just cleaning it up when I drove by today. They were pulling some more debris out. I mean, we're lucky that Kipling's didn't get damaged, I guess.
Oh man, and so hats off to Central Station. And so lucky that they were right across, because I got to believe from the photos and everything that I saw, if that was allowed to burn for 10 more minutes, we might be talking about a different story for Kipling's today.
And there's a big hole. There's a big hole right there physically, and it leaves a big hole, I think, emotionally and spiritually for a lot of people in Brattleboro. I mean, McNeill's, he did a lot of things in the community. People love to go there and do those things that he used to sponsor. Mm-hmm. And, it was very central to a lot of people's lives. I mean, and when he closed for COVID, I know it left a big hole, and now that hole won't be filled.
Right. Also, over the weekend, again on Friday night, there was a woman who perished in a house fire in Reedsboro. Yeah, I know, but it's crazy. So I'm hoping that whatever's happening is reached its end with that kind of thing.
It's that time of the year too. You know, it's cold. People are turning on their wood stoves or their electric heaters, and some of that stuff maybe hasn't been tuned up, and or people aren't really paying attention. It usually does happen about this time of the year where we have these fires because people haven't cleaned their chimneys. They're not taking care of their electric heaters, or they're being a little careless with electric heaters. So it's just that time of the year. We do see a rash of house fires or fires like this when it starts getting cold.
Right. Go clean your chimneys. Seriously.
It is true.
So let's jump to this other story that I've been kind of loosely following about the subpoena. Now this is something you've covered at great length.
We have covered it. I mean, we've been covering it since Mr. Fonseca Rivera's body was found on the side of Route 103, I believe, in Rockingham, and he was shot in the face. Police kind of had a suspect within a couple of days, and they talked to the suspect, but it took them a couple of years to actually come around to arresting him. A doctor who has a second home in Londonderry, him and his wife now live in Florida, so he was attending court on Friday via the internet. But so there's no homicide trial, hasn't been scheduled yet. It's a case, the police are saying it's a case of road rage. They haven't really explained it. There's a lot of details that have been left out. We're hoping that maybe we'll start seeing more of those as depositions and discovery proceeds. But the defense counsel did something that apparently, according to Judge Catherine Hayes, was unprecedented in Windham County, was served a subpoena on the Vermont State Police and the barracks commander in Westminster, Lieutenant French. And he wanted everything that the police had collected on his client, Dr. Peary. And including communication about how they decided to go about determining that Dr. Perry was the actual suspect. Some of that information, first of all, when the Vermont State Police is done with investigation, everything gets turned over to the state's attorney's office. State's attorney is the official custodian of the documents now.
Okay.
If the Vermont State Police are communicating with each other or with the state's attorney about how the investigation is proceeding, that stuff's technically work product. And the prosecution or the defense doesn't have any right to have that. It's like you talking to your attorney about how your case, the prosecution can't have access to that communication. I'm sure that there are cases where that communication might be available. So they wanted this. They wanted to know, well, we don't know why you didn't do the investigation this way, why you didn't do it that way, why did you focus on him? So they subpoenaed the Vermont State Police, and Catherine Hayes, Judge Hayes, who does not mince words, says, I find it a little bit sneaky that you're going around the prosecutor. Why aren't you just dealing with the prosecutor? And if you're not getting the documents you want, then you come to me and I'll make sure that you get the documents you want. And the defense counsel is, well, I've done it before in other courts. And she's like, not in my court, you haven't.
Right. Okay. So she really called him out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if Dr. Perry needs to find another attorney, or if this attorney was just, like she said, trying to be a little sneaky and go. She also characterized it as a backdoor. It's not the appropriate process.
Right.
You get all this information through discovery. And then if you don't get what you want from the prosecutor, you come to me, the judge, and say, I didn't get what I needed. I need you to order them to give it to me.
Plain and simple.
Seems that way.
But it didn't play out that way.
No.
All right. So how do we think this one's going to end?
Well, they got to work. The defense and the prosecution have to work together on, the discovery process. The defense has to say, I want these documents. Prosecutor has basically said, we've given them everything that they legally can have. I mean, but if they want more information, we'd be glad to work with them. They want more license plate reader information because they want to know who was driving that day.
Okay.
The prosecution says, we've given you everything in that time span. And the defense is like, we want anything outside of that time span. And the prosecution's like, well, you need to ask the federal government, because this was part of the interesting part is that Vermont doesn't run license plate readers on the highway, but the federal government does.
Oh.
So there are.
Wait. So how does that work? So the technology's there. Vermont just doesn't use it. Is that what I'm understanding?
Our legislature wouldn't allow our police to use license plates readers, but the Department of Justice and the FBI runs them on the highways because we're within that 100 miles of the border thing. Like the whole state of Vermont and New Hampshire and most of Maine are within that. So technically it's part of the border enforcement that they're tracking license plates and looking for patterns and stuff like that. But
again, so the technology is there.
Yeah.
The state of Vermont's just not using it.
Well, I mean, they'll use it when they ask the DOJ for the documents, but they're not. The state's not implementing that. So because they don't need to, they get it from the Department of Justice.
All right.
Why bother? If
no. I agree. But if we're not using it actively, it seems silly.
And I know that the ACLU has done some work on that. I mean, the ACLU has a website, and I think they might even tell you where the license plate readers are. I didn't go that deep into the story to find out which license plate reader they were using. There must be one in the Rockingham region. I would narrow assume, this down. I would think that it looks like there's at least a dozen of them in Vermont. So something to be aware of if you're a
story to follow. Yeah. Then. Well, I mean, there's more to come.
If you're smuggling illegal aliens, then you might want to pay attention to that fish.
I'm not. All right. I think that's everything for this week of Vermontitude. Once again, good. Bob, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Peter.
All right.